Welcome back to Like Tac. I'm Jim Jansen, and last week I sent my daughter an Asus ZenBook. When she got the ZenBook, she opened it up, loaded Windows operating system, and the very first thing she did was go to the desktop and deleted that Windows background and added her own personal background. Then she put stickers on the outside and took pictures and sent it to mom and dad on Messenger. So essentially, she branded her notebook to her personality. When we get the CMS or Cisco Meeting Server and we open up our web app for the first time, we see the Cisco branding and Cisco information and how to log into our conferences. And that's not the experience we want to deliver to our employees or customers. So we want to brand our landing page for conferences. And that's what we're going to do today. So let's go configure Like Tac. When my daughter got the ZenBook, she didn't go directly to the fun of branding her desktop and putting stickers on it. No, she had to do some work. The work she had to do was load that Windows operating system so she could change the desktop. In the same spirit, with CMS Web App branding, we have to do some work too. So let's go ahead and look at the requirements for web branding, see how it's supposed to be configured, those kind of things. At the time of this recording, CMS is transitioning from version 2.9 to 3.0, and there are some significant changes in those versions. When it comes to the landing page where we join our conferences or log into our co-spaces, the only significant change here will be the protocol used by the browser to connect to WebBridge. In versions 2.9 and prior, we use the protocol WebRTC, which is part of the Chrome browser suite. In 3.0 and later, we're going to use our web app, which is a Cisco proprietary application using C2W protocol. So let's look at the requirements for branding. First, we have a zip file. In the old version, we see WebRTC_client.zip. The new branding, we see WebApp_client.zip. And I want to dispel some misunderstandings regarding this zip file. When we look at the Cisco documentation for creating the zip file in the customization guide, we see that for WebRTC app assets, we want to create a zip file called WebRTC_client.zip. Well, when it comes to putting this file onto the web server, it really doesn't have to have that naming convention. You can call it anything you like. You can call it rebels.zip or empire.zip, like in my examples that are coming up. You can call it branding.zip. The point is, the naming convention of the file is not significant to this working properly. So let's go back to the list. The second thing we want to consider when doing branding is the file formats. PNG, JPEG, or JSON are the requirements for both servers. File zip size is got to be less than 1 meg. That still hasn't changed. File names are case sensitive, and both support local and web server. So there's no significant difference other than the protocol that the browser uses. The one thing we can point out between web server and local branding is that the local branding server has to have the naming convention web_branding.zip for it to work properly. When we look at the WebRTC versus Web App landing pages, we can see some new changes. In the WebRTC, we still see the sign-in settings JSON. We see sign-in logo PNG, sign-in settings JSON, in sign-in background. But we have some new features here on Web App. We have branding browser tab labels. We have a favicon now. We still have the sign-in logo still, but we have some new significant JSON changes. We have a token for brand title. We have a token for brand subtitle and a brand tagline. Also, we see the sign-in background JPEG is still there. So let's go forward with this in mind and see what the requirements are for this page to be successfully loaded. Let's review some of the common branding file mistakes made. First is the improper file type. Second is the improper file size. And third is the improper zipping of the branding files. Here we see the web app image requirements documentation. We know that we have to adhere to the file naming convention as used in Table 1. First, the name of the file has to be favicon.png, signinlogo.png, signinbackground.png, and text strings JSON. The max file size for favicon is 128 KB. The sign-in logo is 250 KB. The sign-in background is 500 KB, and the text strings JSON cannot be larger than 6 KB. When I was doing my testing in the lab for the favicon, I tried both 16 by 16 and 32 by 32 pixels. I did not have any good success with 32 by 32 pixels, but that might have been because of my image. But the recommendation is 1:1, and I use 16 by 16 in my lab. The sign-in logo has to be 128 by 128 pixels, and the sign-in background has to be 1920 by 1080 pixels. The recommended aspect ratio is preferably 16:9. Also, for the text strings JSON, you can have different tokens in that JSON that have to be strictly adhered to. For instance, the brand underscore title can have up to 24 characters on the first display line, or up to 48 characters over 2 lines. So the total file size of the zip file must be less than 1 meg, and the maximum decompressed file size of any one file is 512 KB. For the web server branding, the zip file is retrieved by the call bridge and then used by the web bridge to brand the web app. For local hosted branding, the zip file is retrieved locally by the web bridge to brand the web app. This is significant because if we deploy our branding files on a web server, we have to know that the call bridge is the one that's going to fetch the files for us. So when we try to fetch the files, we have to restart the call bridge. Or if we're locally hosting the files on the CMS server itself, we have to know that the web bridge service is the one that has to be restarted in order to fetch the files into our Apache server. So this is an important fact to know. So we got the images back from the graphic artist, or perhaps we're doing them ourselves. And we tried to load them into the branding archive, but that's not working for us. So we have to troubleshoot the attributes of the images. And how do we do that? Well, we go into the folder and highlight one like the favicon here, and then we right-click and choose Properties. After we get to the Properties page, we click on the Details tab, and we see Image, File, and Size attributes. We look at the image attribute, 16 by 16 pixels, and that's what's recommended by Cisco, so we know that that is good. We look at the file name, and we see the file name favicon.png also meets the Cisco recommendations. And lastly, we look at the size, and we see the max size is meeting the criteria recommended by Cisco. So if any of these attributes are incorrect, we need to go back to our editor and get those corrected before this will work properly. When it comes to troubleshooting our JSON file, we have to understand that CMS can only interpret the file with certain characteristics. First file we see here is a JSON file with the correct token names, but the significant difference here is we see in the yellow that the quotes are curly. These are also known as smart quotes, and they're usually used by programs like Word or WordPad, that kind of program. When we actually use a programmer's text editor like Notepad++ below here, we see that the quotes are straight quotes. CMS will be able to understand those quotes while it will not understand curly quotes. So when you're writing out your text_string.json files, make sure you use a programmer's text editor and that the encoding type for the text is UTF-8. Here are the meeting server steps to host branding archive files on the web server. 1. Create a zip archive file containing these files: favicon.png, sign_in_background.jpg, sign_in_logo.png, text_strings.json. 2. On the web server, create a directory for the customization files and place the zip file in it. 3. Using the API, create a WebBridge node specifying the URL of how C2W will connect to the call bridge. For example, c2w://core1.cms3jajansen.local:4999 will reach my call bridge. 4. Using the API, create a WebBridge profile, then specify in the resource archive field the URL to the web server where the zip files are held. For example, https://14.49.18.252/brandingrebel/rebels.zip is where my zip files are held. 5. Using the API, apply the WebBridge profile to the newly created WebBridge. 6. Restart call bridge. Now that we have a fundamental understanding of CMS Web App branding, we're going to go to our next video where we'll demonstrate how to configure CMS and the web server for branding. I'll see you on the other side.